Today you're going to learn all about the next part of Colorado history, the Colorado Gold Rush. The Colorado Gold Rush was referred to as the Pikes Peak or Bust Gold Rush. So what we're going to do, we're going to start off by understanding about one of the first explorations and expeditions that was led after the Colorado land was purchased by the United States and the Louisiana Purchase. So first let's talk about why Pikes Peak was named Pikes Peak.
Pikes Peak in the state of Colorado is one of the most famous summits in the United States of America. Located in the Rocky Mountains, its official elevation is 14,115 feet above sea level. Stack roughly 1,400 elephants on top of each other, and you're there. While we could get stuck on the impressive physical statistics of Pikes Peak, today we're going to focus on how this massive mountain has played a huge role in U.S. history. Welcome to That Was History. I'm your host, Cliff Langston. So, how exactly has Pikes Peak contributed to U.S. history? There are so many ways to answer this question, but let's just focus in on some of the highlights. Kicking off our list, the Ute Native American tribe believed that the Great Spirit created the entire world from Pikes Peak's location and formed the mountain by pouring ice and snow through a hole in the sky. While we know this not to be true today, that's a pretty impressive title to have held. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson completed the Louisiana Purchase. The United States paid France roughly $15 million to acquire approximately 828,000 square miles of land known as the Louisiana Territory. Pikes Peak was included in that purchase, officially making it part of the United States. 3 short years later, President Jefferson sent out explorers to survey the land that he had purchased. The famous Lewis and Clark expedition headed out towards the northwestern part of the territory, and another party led by Lieutenant Zebulon Montgomery Pike was sent to explore the southern region. As you might recognize, Lieutenant Pike is the individual from which Pikes Peak gets its name. The mountain was named James Peak for roughly 20 years between 1820 and 1840 due to the fact that Dr. Edwin James was the first recorded person to reach the summit in 1820. Dr. James' contribution did not stop there, however, as he also made notes and provided examples of undiscovered plants and flowers, including Colorado's state flower, the blue columbine. In 1840, the official name was declared Pikes Peak, since Zebulon Pike was the first American to document the mountain. By the late 1850s, Pikes Peak had become an icon among gold seekers who were trying to strike it rich during the Colorado Gold Rush. This time in history was also known as the Pikes Peak Gold Rush, and the phrase Pikes Peak or Bust was often seen on wagons traveling towards the region.
So now that you've learned about why Pikes Peak is named Pikes Peak after Zebulon Pike, now what we're going to do is we are going to learn a little bit more about the history before the Gold Rush happened, so a little bit of prehistory. So this is what one of the wagons would have looked like if you were seeing it on the wagon train of someone coming to Pikes Peak. So it'd say Pikes Peak or Bust, letting people know that they were actually trying to go to the Pikes Peak Gold Rush. So the Gold Rush, as you can see here, is from 1859 to 1861. So before the Gold Rush, a few other things besides Zebulon Pike's expedition into the area. In 1835, a French trapper named Eustace Carrier actually got lost in Colorado. So he was lost out in the wilderness of Colorado for a few weeks, and he found some specimens that he thought might be gold. And then later on, he actually had them tested, and they were pure gold. So he tried to lead an expedition back to the location where he found the gold, but he actually could not quite remember where it was. So even though he knew it was in this area, they still weren't sure where it was. So that was one piece that was a little bit of gold that was found, but not their location was not 100% known. So then in 1849, the Cherokee Trail was established by a wagon train headed for the California Gold Rush that was also happening during this time. So a lot of people were moving westward on the Cherokee Trail, going from the eastern part of the United States to California to look for gold. So what also happened, because the Cherokee Trail went through this area, people started stopping at rivers and looking for gold on their way to California. So in 1849 and 1850, several different parties would stop at like the South Platte River at the foot of the Rocky Mountains and other places. And they found a little bit of gold, but not so much that they would actually decide to stay. So they continued on to California. In 1857, the hysteria of the California gold rush started to die down, which means that there wasn't that much more gold left in California to find. So a lot of the miners decided to return home. Because there had been rumor to find some gold in the Rocky Mountains, some of those people decided to get parties and come to this area that is now Colorado and start looking for gold here. In the summer of 1857, a party of Spanish-speaking gold seekers from New Mexico actually worked their place to deposit along the South Platte River, about 5 miles above Cherry Creek. That's now part of the metropolitan area. And they actually found a little bit of gold. So what happened was, because of that, in 1958, a year later, or sorry, 1858, the typo, William Greenberry Green Russell, he was a Georgian who actually had worked in the California gold fields. He was married to a Cherokee woman, and through the Cherokee woman's tribe and Green Russell's family and his friends, 107 people ended up getting together in a party. And what they did was they traveled to this area, and they actually took a stop off in Bensport. They actually went to Bensport, that you learned about yesterday. They turned northwest, and then they actually got all the way to Confluence Park at Cherry Creek. It wasn't a park at that point, but they got to the confluence of Cherry Creek and the South Platte, where those two rivers meet. That's actually the Confluence Park that's in downtown Denver today. They began prospecting the riverbeds, and they didn't really find much. But a couple months later, in July of 1858, Green, Russell, and Sam Bates, his friends, they found a small placer deposit near the mouth of Little Dry Creek. They actually found 622 grams of gold. That was the first significant gold find in the Rocky Mountain region, and that was the catalyst for starting off the actual Colorado Gold Rush. So 622 grams of gold by this man right here set off a frenzy of Americans coming to this area. So you would see ads in newspapers, you would see wagon trains advertising for people to join them to come to this area to mine for gold. In 1859, as early as the spring and as actually in the winter of 1858, people started heading this way. They got here and they found that they were going to have to wait for the snow to melt. So that is why people were not able to mine for gold, the majority of the people that came here until 1859. That is why if you ever hear about the Colorado Gold Rush, you will hear it called, or you will hear the miners called 59ers. And that is because the majority of the miners that moved to this area came here in 1859. So they're called the 59ers. So because when they were on their way to Colorado, or on the way to this area, the main thing, the very first thing that they saw, and they like could know that they were close, was they could see the peak of Pikes Peak. And that's why it was called the Pikes Peak Gold Rush. And even though the Pikes Peak Gold Rush was 85 miles north of Pikes Peak, that's where the majority of the gold was found, not even actually near Pikes Peak, but you could still see Pikes Peak, and that actually let people know that they were almost to where their their destination was at. So here are just a couple pictures of miners mining. So this is called a placer mine. You can see him, he's panning for gold. This right here is a picture that they've added color to, so you can see what it might have looked like actually in a real mine camp. This is a log cabin that someone made. This is another mining camp. So the mining camps actually have been converted into cities that we still hear about today. So Denver City, which is the picture that's behind me as well. So this is the artist's rendering of what they think, or what Denver City was said to look like back then. Denver City, Boulder City, those were both mining camps. Central City, Black Hawk, Georgetown, Idaho Springs, those all originated as a mining camp, and now they have turned into cities. So this is a picture of what Denver City looked like probably in the 1850s. You can see that there's a few buildings, there's some tents, but it's pretty sparse and there's not much there. Here's an actual, they think that this might be the very first picture of Denver. ever taken. Then what happened also was because of the gold rush, other things started happening. So other people started coming to this area to make money in different ways because the population was increasing so much. You will hear about a couple of different places that were along like the Cherokee Trail that allowed people to stop and have services and a place to stay and get food as they were traveling to Denver or in the Denver area. So in 1859, brothers Samuel and Jonas Brantner built a two-story log cabin along the Cherry Creek. You can actually still go there today with a tour. It's called the 4 Mile House. You may have been there. And so they offered services to travelers traveling along the Cherokee Trail. It was called the 4 Mile House, or it is called the 4 Mile House, because at that time, when you were traveling along the trail, you were 4 miles away from Denver. And when you were traveling with a wagon and oxen, you could only travel a few miles every day because the oxen just couldn't travel that far and that fast with that much stuff. And so you would have to stop every few miles. And so there was a 4 mile house, there was a 9 miles, there was a 9 mile house. And so you would every so often you would have places to stop, and you would then be able to go a few more days before you would go to your next location. So like I said, the results of the gold rush, so many people came to Colorado that the population rapidly rose. And so the population boom created lots of other business. And you're going to learn more about the creation of the state of Colorado tomorrow, but the Colorado Territory was created in 1861. There were by 1862, 225,000 troy ounces of gold were found just that year. And this actually led Congress to establishing a mint. And so even since 1862, we've had a mint, and that was a result of the gold rush. And so now we're going to watch just a quick video about how you're going to see how the gold rush affected Colorado in a different way.
The gold rush, it really is one of the most important events in Colorado history. It jump-started our state's economy. And without it, Colorado as we know it would not exist. The first documented finding of gold was in 1850. A group of Cherokee discovered gold flakes in Ralston Creek in today's Arvada. This sparked the gold rush a few years later. In 1858, the biggest gold searching expedition to date came out here to Colorado, and they didn't really have a lot of luck. They didn't find much, so most of those guys had gone home. 13 stayed on and kept looking, and just about a little over a week later, they found a significant amount of gold in the Platte River, about 4 miles upstream from today's confluence with the Cherry Creek. The news exploded into the eastern United States, and through the winter of 1858, people flocked to Colorado. Men like William Byers, the founder of the Rocky Mountain News, and William H. Laramie started buying up land in and around Denver. What these guys knew was that it was way more likely that they were going to make a buck. Publishing newspapers, selling whiskey, selling mining supplies in Denver than it was that they were actually going to find gold. And it turned out they were right. Mining towns like Gold Hill, Central City, and Leadville were born, and surrounding towns like Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins, and Colorado Springs started to prosper as well. So, the ultimate significance of the gold rush for modern Colorado is really that it set up our state's current geography. Without the gold rush, it's difficult to say what Colorado looked like. How can you not love that piano?
So not only did the gold rush impact where towns and cities are today in Colorado, it really did have a big impact on just the businesses that people brought here. It had an impact on how fast the population grew, and it impacted even us having a mint that we can still go to today. So hopefully you've learned a lot about the gold rush. So on your timeline today, what you need to do is you need to draw a picture of something that relates to mining. It could be Pikes Peak and then like a stream in the front of it where people are mining for gold. It could be just a stream with trees by it where people are actually finding gold. It could be a mining camp. You are going to add at least 3 sentences behind your picture, and the dates that you are going to write for your timeline are 1859 to 1861. Hopefully you've learned a lot about the gold rush, and have a great day.